If this is the first time you're hearing the term art journaling and you have no idea what that means, well, let me tell you, everything we done here during this course was pretty much art journaling because we were working in a book. Art journaling is like creating your visual diary. You work with usually mixed media techniques that I was presenting to you and many more. But the most important thing is you're working in a book, whether that's a small or a large book, handmade or ready-made. It doesn't matter. If you can close it, it's an art journal. And the most important thing in art journaling is that you try and express something, some meaning, or you try and process whatever you're feeling, or you capture some memories, or maybe you just have fun. It has to be a practice that makes you feel good, at least in my opinion. Now, there are many other artists who have different kind of opinions, but that's mine. You have to enjoy it and really be in the process, and that's what I always encourage, whether that's on our Wanderlust course or my smaller courses or through our social media. This is the most important thing to me. Let's be in a process. Let's really enjoy it, and hopefully you'll see this in action today. As we are working on our spread today, I will talk you through my 5-step formula for journaling pages. It's super easy to follow and it will make the process so much easier for you, so I really hope you'll join in. Let's start with step 1, and that is planning. Now, I am all about exploration and experimenting in our art, but I found that especially if you're a beginner, if you have a tiny little bit of a plan to start with, the whole process is going to be much easier because you will have a little bit less choices to make during the process. And by plan, I mean deciding roughly on those 3 components: color, composition, and focal point. Now, you know a thing or two about colors, right? So grab your color wheel and choose your colors for this spread. I'm gonna go with warm side of my color wheel. And even just that is enough to start with. As long as you have a rough idea what colors you're gonna be reaching for, it takes a little bit of anxiety from later in the process away. So what colors you feel drawn to today? Are they cool? Maybe it's just greens, maybe you're into blues, or maybe you're into something really bursting with life and vibrant, or maybe pastels. Whatever that is, just have a little think. Like I said, I'm gonna go for warm, softish colors. The second thing to roughly plan before you start working is your focal point. Now, focal point is an image or a word, an object that draws attention in your work. That's the first thing that the viewer is looking at because focal point stands out. But focal points come in all shapes and sizes, and it will depend on you, whichever you go for. So an old or a new photograph is a great focal point. A cutout from a magazine, so like a person, an object, picture of a cat, picture of a dog, picture of a telephone, or a man in a tall hat. Here are some examples. We have these sheets at Everything Art that you can print out and cut your focal points from, and they are full of all sorts of images, and they save you a lot of time on looking through the internet or through your magazines, which can be very destructive. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole when you're looking for images in a magazine. But that's a good focal point, right? A focal point could be a piece of old ephemera, so like this little card, because maybe you just love the way it looks, or maybe you want to say through your journal page that you have a certain passion for a certain plant or gardening or nature. But it could also be a word or a quote. But the most important thing about focal points is that they have to stand out from the background. So if you have an image that's black and white and a colorful background, then of course the image is going to stand out. If you have an image that's very bright, but the background is dark, that's also going to do it. If your word or a quote is quite bold, it will probably also stand out, but there are ways in which we can make the focal point stand out more. I talked about it in our previous lesson a little bit, and I'm going to tackle this today again. Where you place your focal point really matters. If you place it in the wrong spot, it will make your whole page or spread look really coherent and pleasing to the eye. So let me show you the rule of thirds, which I'm sure many of you already heard. Let's pretend this is our double spread, right? And rule of thirds means that we are dividing our substrate into 9 rectangles or squares with evenly spaced lines, 4 lines. And we are placing our focal point on the intersection of 2 lines. So either here or here or here or here. And that's really simple to understand, right? And that means that we create the perfect amount of balance. But even easier will be, let's say this is your double spread, to place your focal point centrally on one of the spreads, right in the middle. And this is what we've done twice already on this course with our first page. You see, she's right in the middle. This is a single page, it doesn't matter. She's right in the middle. And here, right, the couple is dancing right in the middle. So whether you're working on a double spread or a single page, in the middle is your safest way to place your focal point. That will always work. Let me show you some examples. So this is my daily journal that I filled in a few years ago. Wow, 8 years ago, as it turns out. It's ages ago. But anyway, this is a page and the focal point is this large piece of text that really stands out and it's right in the middle. Here, this is a double spread. The focal point is this image of feet, which sort of stands out and is right in the middle, right? And here, there's things going on, but I still feel like this is the strongest. But rules are here to be broken. So you don't always have to have a focal point, and you don't always have to place it either centrally or on the intersection following the rule of thirds. You know, because this is mixed media, we're free to do whatever we want. So let me show you an example, right? This is the focal point. It's definitely not following the rule of thirds, but it works because I sort of balanced it with a lot going on here at the top, so it's not imbalanced. Another example, the focal point here is really hard to define really, because there's a lot of elements, darker and lighter, that are kind of layered. So you could think the focal point is this block of handwriting, or maybe this darker spot here, because a splodge of paint, if it stands out, it can also be a focal point. Doesn't follow rule of thirds, doesn't follow the central idea, and it's a great page. I really enjoyed making it, and it looks good, I think. So it's all in the balance, and just keeping those rules in mind so you can break them. That's what I want to encourage. Here's another example. That's a focal point that you could say is kind of centrally placed, but also it isn't. And here, surprise, surprise, is a spread that does follow the rules. Focal point is this little bit of text is placed centrally on one side, and that works too. So it's all good, it's all fun, but plan your colors, plan your focal point, prepare it, and think of the composition roughly. So what I'm planning for this spread is I'm going to use warm colors. This is my focal point. It's a printed image of a woman dancing in black and white, so it's gonna stand out because I'm planning to use colors. And I am going to place her roughly in the center of this page. It's a large image, so she can't be like this because we're gonna cut off her hand. I don't want this to happen, so she's gonna have to be like this. But then when you think about it, that works, because if you imagine a rule of thirds, right, happening here, her head, which, you know, in a person that often is a focal point, is on the intersection of those lines. So yeah, maybe I accidentally actually followed my own rules. Wow. Now the fun begins. Step 2 in my 5-step art journaling formula is collage. We're starting with collage, and you know a little bit about it, right? So we're gonna work with some mostly neutral colored pieces of paper, some of them painted, some of them scrapbooking papers, some of them wrapping papers. When I choose colors, I go for neutrals and or colors that match my initial color palette idea. I will start with the largest pieces as always and add a few smaller elements. My collage is finished, so there isn't that much going on because we are going to be adding color, and that's my step 3, adding media. So we're going for watercolors and acrylics because we know that, right? But you could also right now add a little bit of texture with modeling paste, which is something you also learned during the mark making lesson. But for this spread, we are just going to add acrylics first. And you know, I told you choose your color palette, so I went for some warm colors, so that's what I squeezed out onto my palette, plus a little bit of white. But I also love to start with dark color, and this is dark blue. Dark blue can also be warm. This is a mix of raw umber and primary blue, and together they create this very deep, dark and warm blue. So that's fine. A cold blue could be clashing a little bit with the other colors, but there's a chance it would work too. So look what colors you have amongst your stash and choose something darker. If you only have black, that's fine too. And let's make a few large bold patches of black. Now keep in mind where your focal point is going to go, right? Just so you know you don't have to put too much work into like this area, right? Because that's gonna be mostly covered. Now you may be asking, what was the point of putting down all these beautiful collage papers if we're covering them now with acrylic paint, right? Well, you get to decide what you cover and what you don't cover. You can put very small patches of acrylic color. You also get to decide how much of your spread you cover with collage papers and what collage papers you choose. But one more thing to ponder is this process is all about joy. Right? We want to feel happy when we're doing it. If putting down acrylic paint makes you feel happy, put it all over your spread, right? If it doesn't, don't. You get to decide. Now I am using my smaller paintbrush to make some expressive marks as well, to bring a little bit of movement to this page. Okay, now let's have a look at our focal point. Let's just hold it where it's roughly going to go. This is looking fine. So you see there's two big bold patches of dark that are balanced. They are on the opposite sides and they're placed in a way so the page doesn't seem to be leaning toward any side, if you know what I mean. This is a good moment to kind of take a step back and have a look. Does it feel balanced, or is there like lots going on here and nothing here, right? But keeping in mind, obviously, that you will have your focal point. Now, we need this dark color to dry now, and we will be ready to add some more of these acrylics. I am going to work with the same largish brush, and I am going to add a few more patches of acrylic color in those reds, pinks, and yellow ochres, mixed with white sometimes on their own. Just see how it feels, and that's the most important part of this process. You're gonna have to, you know, ever so often stop and just see, have a good look and pay attention to how you feel. If it's bringing you joy, you're going the right direction. If you feel like you're struggling, take a step back, make yourself a cup of tea, have a little break, and just, you know, sometimes we need to just detach from what we're doing because we get too precious about the result. Let's remember, we're here to have fun. And I know I said this blue paint has to be dry, this dark paint has to be dry, but mine isn't quite dry. And you can take advantage of it and kind of let the colors blend and mix, but not too much, because you may end up with colors you didn't plan for your spread. And that might be a fantastic surprise and a very welcome development, or it may be something you don't enjoy. So, you know, be prepared. Anything can happen. And again, I grabbed my smaller brush to add a few expressive marks because let's not forget, she's dancing. We need something to be, you know, kind of dancing on this page too, not just the lady. And I am really close to be finished with my acrylic color now. Now, what I like to do next, if I plan to use watercolors, is to create a space for watercolors. Now you see this is a really busy background. So I would like to let this fully dry and then we'll create some space for watercolors. You remember that one supply I said you really must have, white gesso? We're going to use it now, but in a slightly different way, because it is really the most versatile art supply that is pretty necessary on your art desk. So I squeezed some of that white gesso onto my palette, and I am going to create space for our watercolors by covering some of this. So we're gonna be taking some of that busyness away. And remember, you're the master of this ship. You get to decide how much you cover up and how much you leave visible. And I've made pages where very little was visible and they were really strong and they were very powerful, I felt. And I made pages where there's just a tiny little bit of white to create the right balance, and that was it. And I was pleased with that too. So remember, you're the master of this ship and you get to decide, but most of all, you must enjoy it. There is simply no other way. So the same brush, a larger kind of big thumb-sized brush, and let's dip it in white gesso. Now you could use white acrylic paint as well, but you're not gonna get such a good result because first of all, some white acrylics won't be as opaque depending on the color. I mean the tint. And other thing is that we are going to be applying watercolors on top of those white patches. And they need to adhere, they need that tooth, and gesso provides that. Acrylic paint doesn't really, no, it's quite shiny. Right, so keep in mind where your focal point is going to go and where would you like to create lighter space. So to me, this is a lot of dark here, right? It's a bit too much, so I'm just going to go like here. And I think that's gonna be really cool. I'm gonna continue it here, so you have to squint your eyes ever so often. Hold your focal point roughly. And you can make the edges of this white paint or gesso very sharp and precise and, you know, contrasting, or you can wet your finger a little bit, too much, and blend them and soften them, right? And you can do both as well, and I like to do both because I think that blending creates like a dreamy effect, while the sharp contrasting edge is stronger. And I think we're all a mixture of both, right? So let's do both on our art journal. Now the secret that I believe is really going to make your page. If you're applying color, just go bold, right? If you decided on putting some white, make these patches larger, or just one larger patch, and make them connect at least if they are smaller. Now time for the final addition of color in our step 3 of my 5-step formula. Gesso is dry, we can add some watercolors now, right? So I have my palette ready. I'm still following the color palette that I planned at the beginning. Of course, you can always change your mind and add different colors that you would think maybe will clash, because sometimes they work beautifully. Let yourself be surprised. And you get to decide obviously now where you put these watercolor marks, and you can add a lot or very little. But I think the most important thing here is that we're responding to what's going on, right? We're not trying to plan from the start exactly how this spread is going to look like at the end. We're responding to what we're creating. So I've added my gesso, and when I hold my focal point, I think this is really well balanced. So I want to add just a very small amount of watercolor. I want to add it because it's beautiful and transparent, and it will bring that extra dreaminess, which I think especially goes with this picture. But equally, I don't want to cover too much of that white. So I'm gonna dip this fan brush into this orangey russet color and let this spread in some areas. And of course you can put it on other areas as well, not just on the gessoed area, but if you put it on gesso, of course it will stand out the most and it will be the strongest. But as you maybe noticed, how I covered my dark patches, right? So at the beginning, I'm sure to some of you, they felt very stark and like, wow, that's a lot of dark. But as you can see, because we're responding to what's going on and not necessarily planning too much, we get to make them a little bit less later on and balance them, so we get the look that just makes us happy at that moment. Now, step 4 is the easiest of all because we've done step 1. Now we are going to glue down our focal point. But it is important that you do it at this stage rather than at the beginning because it will have a chance of standing out, right? So you will get to see it now, while if you place it down on your collage in the beginning of this process, you'd probably cover it with paint a little bit, and that may be a look you will want to go for with your next spread. But here we're playing with a focal point that really strongly stands out. And now for the final 5th step of our process, we are adding mark making. And you can do it with all the supplies that are available to you, like pastels, pencils, markers, stamps. I am going to go for one of my favorite tools, really, is Stabilo, or pencils that they are water soluble and they go over everything and anything. They will draw on metal even. So where you have a surface like that has multiple different layers, it's a really good go for tool because they will draw on everything. I will also maybe use my graphite pencil to add a little bit of writing because that's kind of a mark as well, right? One thing you may want to have a look at is your composition one more time before you start placing these marks, so you know where to put them. In my case, I have this very large, strong focal point and things going on here. So it would make sense to balance the focal point with a slightly larger amount of marks on this side and maybe a little fewer around the focal point. So keep that in mind. See where you're maybe missing a little bit of impact, and that's where you could put your marks. And when it comes to marks, we're talking little scribbles, we're talking maybe hand-drawn symbols, and maybe a little bit of handwriting, like I mentioned. You can also draw on your focal point, and I think I will add a little bit of writing on this large area of her dress. I won't necessarily fill it all, but just a few words to bring that extra interest. Now at this stage, once you've added all of your marks, you may look at your spread or page and see that your focal point, it doesn't stand out as much as you like it to. And this is a good moment to give it a little outline with a pencil or with a piece of graphite and smudge it, or even with a marker if you want it to stand out really strongly. Or you could do it with a little bit of watercolor in like a gray color maybe, or something like that. Let's just see what I've got on my palette here. I have a lot going on my palette. And with a smaller pointed brush, I am just simply going to paint a slight outline around my focal point. And this spread, to me, is finished. Now you could be adding more and more marks. You could even go back to step 3 and add more acrylic paint, more watercolor, more white, more collage elements. But this is the basic process that I think if you follow, you will kind of have a little bit of order in your head when it comes to working with so many supplies, and it will hopefully spark more and more ideas. Now, if you enjoyed this and if you feel like you've learned something, please know you are very welcome to join our community, everything-art.com, where we share courses and lessons and offerings for mixed media artists. You are now ready to take your process a step further. You have a lot of knowledge and a lot of techniques that you can do plenty with. And we have lots of projects for you to explore on our website. Thank you very much for watching this and for participating in this course. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you around. Bye bye.